Let's start off with, why have you made minimum wage the centerpiece of your legislative agenda? Talk a little bit about that.
Because this is going to be a full frontal assault on child poverty, and it's Maryland's time to lead. And when you look at both the Family Prosperity Act, which goes and enhance earned income tax credit, and also making permanent the child tax credit, and also by getting us to a $15 minimum wage, this is going to be the most aggressive assault on child poverty that this state has ever seen. And Maryland needs to lead the way, because right now it is irresponsible for us to be a state that has the highest median GDP of any other state in this country. Yet at the same time, we have hundreds of thousands of children who are living in poverty. It doesn't make sense. And it's not good for us in either the short term or the long term. And so by getting us to a $15 minimum wage, addressing the fact that we have too many people who are still working, and in some cases multiple jobs, and still living at or below a poverty line, it means that Maryland has got to be able to address this, because that's not just going to help the individuals and help the workers by incentivizing work. It's also going to make us more economically competitive, because that's capital that will go back into our economy. And so that's the reason why we have made getting to a $15 minimum wage such a high priority for this administration.
But talk about the importance of tying it to inflation, because let's be honest, there's been some rough sledding in the legislature about this issue. Why tie it to inflation? Why the importance of that aspect?
Well, I think that the data continues to show that it adds a measure of predictability for our businesses. Because before I ran for office, I was an Army officer and I was a small business owner. And I know the thing that I wanted more than anything else was basic predictability. Understanding that how my labor costs were going to match up against my revenue projections, because I needed that when it comes to building out my business model. And so I think that's why the indexing is an important component. And I know, though, that getting to this $15, because we still have people who right now are continuing to work and are still not able to even make the basics. And so for the Fair Wage Act of 2023, which I was very proud to introduce that as one of our first bills that we introduced, making sure we can get to that $15 and get it done not by 2026, but get it done now, is incredibly important to our state's economic health.
Will you be willing to compromise on this, on that issue? Because some legislators that I've talked to have said that inflation aspect is a challenge, because it does provide, according to them, unpredictability for these business owners. So is there a compromise in this for you to get this done, or are you all in to tie it to inflation?
Well, I believe in democracy, right? I'm loving the legislative session. I'm actually really enjoying getting into the weeds of the policy work, and I plan on working in partnership with our legislative partners in order to make this happen. And so I believe in democracy. I'm enjoying the back and forth. I know why indexing is so important, because it does add that measure of predictability for our businesses, particularly for our small businesses. And it's the reason why we've seen businesses from everyone from BGE to well-paid maids. Big businesses and small businesses who back legislation as is. But I know that us getting to this win and us being able to help to lift 152,000 children up an economic rung by getting to that $15 minimum wage, we are going to fight 24/7 if necessary to get that done.
But nevertheless, if you can't get the index tied to it, what will you do to get this bill done?
I think, and I'm excited about our ability to be able to get this bill passed. But I know that in all of this, for us to be able to get to that $15 minimum wage, for us to be able to have an enhanced earned income tax credit, for us to be able to make permanent the child tax credit, that is going to be the largest frontal assault on child poverty that this state has ever seen. And we're going to get it done in our first year of office.
Let's switch gears, and I want to get back to the child poverty thing. Let's talk about the FBI headquarters. And there's been a lot of news lately on Virginia making a push. What's the status of the negotiations? I know you've been doing some things behind the scenes. What can you tell us?
I can tell you that this building needs to end up in Maryland. And I don't just say that because I'm Maryland's governor. I say it because the facts are on our side. that if the layout, if the criteria that they're looking at is saying that we're going to focus on cost, knowing that putting it in Maryland would actually save the American taxpayer anywhere from $250 million to $500 million, putting it in Maryland instead of Virginia. If we're saying that the focus is going to be mission, knowing that even as the FBI said, Director Wray has said that a large part of the future mission for the FBI is going to be on cyber and cyber terrorism. Well, Maryland is the home of Fort Meade, the NSA, U.S. Cyber Command. One of the top universities in this country focusing on cyber is the University of Maryland. One of the other top universities is Johns Hopkins, both Maryland institutions. And if you're telling me that they're going to focus on equity, that the President of the United States has now just put together a second executive order ordering his agencies to focus on racial equity, we're talking about the large, most affluent African-American jurisdiction in this country, Prince George's County, going against Fairfax County, which it's not even just about racial equity. Of the 150 top jurisdictions, large jurisdictions in this country, if you look at economic competitiveness, Fairfax County, Virginia is number 2. Prince George's County is 107. This building belongs in Maryland, and it's going to bring 7,000 plus jobs, billions of dollars of economic activity, and it's not just going to further the mission of the FBI for now, it's going to create strong pipelines for the mission of the FBI in the future. So I'm excited to be able to go head to head in Virginia on this. I feel very confident that as the facts are presented and as they stay, if they stay with the criteria that were laid out, this building will be Maryland's.
But yet, some would argue that Quantico's in Virginia, that the taxes are too high in Prince George's County. What do you say about that?
I would say I'm not sure if I understand why proximity to a training facility should have more weight than proximity to some of the largest cyber assets. I'm not sure why I would say that proximity to a training facility should have a higher weight than the fact that we have a built-in transportation infrastructure in place. Why proximity to a training facility would have more weight to the fact that it's going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars more to put it in Virginia to the American taxpayer, which we should all be focusing on, making sure that every single dollar is being best utilized for the American taxpayer. So to put such a outsized weighting on proximity to a training facility, I'm not sure if I understand that argument.
Are we going to see you be more out front on this? I mean, usually we see Prince George's County's executive, Angela Alsobrooks, on this. But you're the governor. You've been pushing for this behind the scenes. Are we going to see more of a Governor Moore pushing for this in the public realm?
Oh yeah, I'm proud of the fact that we've been in office for weeks, and we've already been very clear, both overtly and covertly, very clear that you don't have a higher priority than what we're seeing right now, making sure that the FBI ends up in Maryland. And let's be clear, the FBI being in Maryland is not just a benefit for Prince George's County. And I'm very thankful for the work that the county executive, that the federal delegation, and others have been doing for years in advancing this. This is a one Maryland mission. And I'm proud of the fact that I am leading Team Maryland on this effort to make sure that we can get the FBI building. And I'm anxious to see what Virginia and Governor Youngkin is going to present. I think our argument's going to be stronger. I think our team is more unified, and I think the building will end up in Maryland.
What's the timeline of this that you've been hearing from federal officials?
Well, I mean, the understanding that we're getting is that the decision is weeks and not months away. We're getting close to close to the goal line on this, and in the fact that we are getting close to a goal line, knowing it's just weeks away from my inauguration, is exciting because I'm eager for us to move aggressively on this issue and make our case very forcefully.
Switching gears, what's been your biggest surprise since becoming governor, and what's been your biggest challenge?
I would say the biggest surprise is how much I'm enjoying the legislative process. I think for so many people came in and said, "Oh, God, you're going to hate session and this and that." I love this stuff. And people forget, I've been working on these issues long before I decided to run for governor. And so I think the fact that we are working in concert with the legislators, both Democrats and Republicans, The fact that we have, that I am the first governor in 8 years to actually testify on behalf of a bill. First lieutenant governor, first time we've had cabinet secretaries in 8 years actually testify on behalf of bills. That we're leaning into the legislative process. I think I've really enjoyed it, and I think watching the response of the other legislators has been great because I think they welcome that.
And your biggest challenge?
I think the biggest challenge is continuing to remind people that we've got real work to do, and there's an urgency inside this work, where I think that people looked at things like surpluses and said, oh, that things must be all moving really well. And we want to be very clear. Right now, currently in state government, there are over 10,000 vacancies in state government. Basic functions aren't being performed, right? We're watching shortages of nurses, shortages of law enforcement, shortages of corrections officers. Basic functions are not being performed everywhere from unemployment insurance to early childhood supports. And so we've got to move with a sense of urgency in all of the work that we're doing. And I think what we're trying to do within our administration is model that and continue to remind people that the reason that we are being ambitious, the reason we are being bold without being reckless, is by showing that Maryland can lead in this moment, but we've got to be intentional.
Now, you've said during the campaign that you wanted to be a different type of governor, and obviously you gave an example of appearing before the legislature, for example. What other aspects have you employed that show that you're a different type of governor?
Well, I think people can see the team that we've already built. As just one example. When I said on the campaign trail that we were going to build an administration that looks like the state of Maryland, I meant that. When we said, I want everybody from around the state, from Western Maryland to the Eastern Shore, different groups to be able to look up at our cabinet and say, I see myself, I meant that. And you can see that the administration that we have built and the cabinet officials that we brought on, this is the most diverse administration that this state has ever seen. But we also show this, being able to focus on equity and involvement does not mean compromising excellence, because this team is both. And that's the thing, I think, that another different lens that we have brought to the work that I'm really excited about, that I think people are already seeing what that looks like and why it benefits all Marylanders.
How influential is your wife in terms of decisions that you've made? Do you consult her? Does she give you feedback?
My wife always gives me feedback. Listen, I'm thankful for the fact that I married my best friend. I'm thankful for the fact that I married someone who I don't just love, but someone who I admire. Someone who truly makes me better every single day. And I know that with every decision that I make, with every issue that I think through and work on, at some point, that basic question of what would Dawn think? How would this impact her? How does our journey, upbringing, path, how is that reflected and seen in the faces and the lives of the Marylanders that these policies are hoping to then support? I think that's always and will always have an important place in how I think about the world.
Are there others that also have your ear and people that you consult to just check in with to say, okay, I've got this minimum wage issue or FBI issue? Are there people that you talk to that you'd feel comfortable talking about, that you consult, that give you good advice?
Yeah, there definitely are. And one of the things I've loved about this journey is the friends that I've always had, those are all still my people, right? I remember I made a pledge at the beginning of this campaign where I said, I have no problem introducing myself to people who don't know me. I will not spend a second reintroducing myself to people who do, right? I want people at the end of this process to always be able to look back and say, Wes is Wes. That's who he's always been. That's how he views the world. It's how he pushes on things. It's part of the reason why, I've said we don't have to give in to these false choices that we keep on getting offered when it comes to politics. This idea that what we're doing is either good for business or good for workers. I don't get that. Why we say, yes, we can actually invest, make the largest investment in public education in the history of the state of Maryland, of any governor, and at the same time say, but we're going to provide tax cuts and tax relief to military veterans and tax relief to lower and middle income families. That we can do both. They don't have to choose. And so the thing that I think that people who've always been very close to my team and my friends for a long time, I want them to always look at the policies that we're pushing and the things we're looking to get done and say, that's who he is, and that's who he's always been.
These poverty numbers for Maryland, they are abysmal, no question about it. And you talked about this assault on poverty. Beyond the minimum wage, what other legislative agenda items do you have that we should know about that will bring this in line with some other parts of the country?
Well, we said from the very beginning that the North Star for our administration, this is about work, wages, and wealth. And you see how so many of the policies that we're pushing together, they're actually focusing on those exact elements, right? It's how are we getting more people back into the workforce? There's no reason that Maryland should be 35th in this country in unemployment. A state with as many assets as we have, for us to have such a high unemployment rate. And the thing is, in the state of Maryland right now, we have 2 available jobs for every single person filing for unemployment. And people say, well, how does that make sense? It makes sense because we have a disconnect between a dynamic economy and people who are actually being prepared to participate. And so you see within our administration, we make significant investments in apprenticeship and trade programs. We continue to lift this bar or this barrier for individuals who somehow believe that they have to. We have some of the best 4-year colleges in this country, but we are going to end this myth that every single one of our students need to attend one in order to be economically successful, right? We want more participation in our economy. We want to make sure that we are doing things like making permanent the child tax credit and with the Family Prosperity Act of 2023, another bill that I introduced, we know that the child tax credit and the earned income tax credit are 2 of the most effective poverty fighting tools that this country has seen. And Maryland has underleveraged them. And so this is our opportunity to build that out. And when it comes to wealth, it just simply means being able to own more than you owe. And so that's why in our budget, we present things like support for potential first-time home buyers to help with things like down payment costs, because we know that's one of the core barriers for people who are first-time home buyers. Creating more incentives and supports for small business owners, because actually creating ownership and equity is the way you're going to drive a measure of generational wealth. And so work, wages, and wealth, that's the North Star for our administration. And I think that is the way we're going to end child poverty, not just in the now, but deal with the long-term causes that continue to allow this element of generational despair that communities and families continue to feel.